Your house is falling apart. The door is practically falling off. And you still dare to ask for my daughter's hand?" the woman shouted loudly, accompanied by laughter from the guests. Amidst scornful looks and cruel insults, the man stood tall, hiding his wounds behind a smile, concealing a huge secret that would silence them all. Before the story begins, we suggest you comment where you're watching this story from. Hit like and subscribe so the Law Story channel can grow and present the best stories possible. Let's begin the story. The old house at the end of the village had long been uninhabited. Its roof tiles were mossy, the walls were starting to crack, and the door creaked every time it opened. But that day, a tall man with neat hair stood in front of the house, smiling. His name was Ranga. He wore a worn-out shirt and faded jeans. Yet his gaze was sharp and full of dignity. No one guessed that this man owned one of the largest property companies in the country. In his daily life, Ranga lived in a high-rise building with personal attendants, luxury cars, and a packed schedule meeting officials and investors. But today, he had returned to his grandfather's inherited house. He disguised himself not because he was bored with the upper world, but because he sought something money couldn't buy. Love. Not love that comes because of bank balances or positions, nor love born from glamour and luxury, but love that grows from a sincere heart. Wanting to be seen for who he truly was, he deliberately didn't bring a luxury car, only an old rusty Toyota Kijang capsule with dents on its door. His driver wasn't anyone special either, just his trusted confidant who had become like family. After cleaning the house and tidying up the old furniture one by one, Ranga began to blend in with the locals. He joined communal work, prayed in congregation at the small prayer hall near the rice fields, and occasionally bought sachet coffee from the shop at the alley entrance. No one knew who he was. In that village, he was only known as Ranga, the quiet man who had just moved in and lived in the dilapidated house left by his late grandfather. Amidst that simplicity, Ranga felt comfortable. He could laugh freely, sleep soundly without work burdens, and most importantly, he could see who approached him for himself, not for his name. And it was there that he met Ayu, a beautiful girl with a simple ponytail, wearing a plain blouse and culottes, moving a pile of clothes in front of her boutique. Ayu was the daughter of the largest landowner in the village. Her boutique was small, but customers were never scarce, not only because of the attractive clothing designs, but also because of her friendly attitude and calming smile. Their first meeting happened when Ranga borrowed a tape, measured to measure the frame of his nearly collapsing roof. Ayu lent it to him without suspicion. From then on, they often met. Ranga always stopped by to buy bottled tea or chips sold by Ayu in front of the boutique. Each small greeting grew into a conversation. Light chats turned into deep discussions. Ranga's heart began to waver. A feeling grew every time he saw Ayu smile, but he remained cautious. He knew Ayu might not be truly sincere, as people could change once they knew his true identity. On the other hand, Ayu also began to like Ranga. To her, Ranga was different from the flashy, smooth-talking city men. Ranga was humble, hard-working, and always kept his promises. But it wasn't that easy. Behind all the smiles, Ayu held a big secret. Her parents were arranging an engagement with a man from the city named Dimas, the son of a successful businessman, a close family friend for years. That marriage promised Ayu a more stable life. However, Ayu felt it wasn't right. Dimas was too arrogant, thinking everything could be bought. She had subtly refused several times, but her mother kept pressuring her. Ayu grew restless. She loved Ranga, but didn't know if Ranga could propose to her. His house was almost collapsing, let alone his future. And here's where all the drama began. An engagement that would bear witness. Was Ayu's love for Ranga truly pure? Or was she just caught in a temporary romance of poverty? Ranga was prepared. He would propose to Ayu, even though he knew this step could break his own heart. Because nothing hurts more than being loved only, when perceived as rich and discarded when seen as poor. That morning, dew still clung to the leaves as Ranga stepped out of his old house, carrying blessings and a paintbrush. He wanted to repaint the fence that had begun to crumble. Across the street, Ayu had already opened her boutique. She was sweeping the yard, when her eyes caught sight of Ranga, whistling softly while he worked. "Mas Ranga already working so early?" Ayu greeted with a smile. Ranga turned and nodded politely. "If I wait until noon, it might rain, Mbak." Ayu chuckled softly. They chatted briefly. Then Ayu brought out 2 glasses of tea. "I made warm tea to keep your spirits up." They sat on the small step in front of the boutique. The conversation, initially just small talk, turned into long stories about childhood, dreams, and their respective fears. Ayu never imagined the simple man before her had such deep and wise thoughts. Meanwhile, Ranga felt himself falling deeper for Ayu's sincerity. However, nothing was as easy as it seemed. Behind Ayu's laughter lay anxiety she hid from Ranga. She knew this feeling shouldn't grow. Her father and mother had long planned to match her with Dimas, the wealthy man who often came to their house in a sports car. Ayu always refused, saying she wasn't ready. But her mother was adamant. To her family, Dimas was the path to a higher social life. Ayu never told Ranga about the arranged engagement. She was afraid Ranga would back off before trying. But from her demeanor, Ranga began to sense Ayu was hiding something. One evening, when Ranga delivered a basket of vegetables to Ayu's house, a side job he took to blend in with the villagers, he saw Dimas lounging casually on Ayu's terrace. The man wore an expensive watch and leaned against a bright red sports car. "Who is he?" Ranga asked a neighbor watering flowers. "Oh, that's Ayu's fiancé. Her parents are very keen. They say Ayu will be engaged next month." Ranga fell silent. His chest felt tight, but he said nothing. He returned to his old house that night with heavy steps, staring at the ceiling while thinking about what he had just heard. 2 days later, however, he was surprised by Ayu's visit to his house. Ayu brought a box of food and sat on the bamboo bench on the porch. "Ms. Ranga," she said softly, "I know you must have heard about Dimas, but I want you to know I don't love him." Ranga looked at Ayu, disbelieving that the woman dared to come to his house alone and speak so honestly. "Then why are you silent when your family arranges the match?" "I'm confused. I want to fight back, but I'm afraid of being called a disobedient daughter," Ayu whispered in reply. Ranga nodded. That night he made a big decision. He would propose to Ayu, but not as Ranga, the property company boss. He wanted to know if Ayu would truly choose him, even if all she saw was a poor man with a dilapidated house and a hand-to-mouth existence. And for that, he had to prepare. He began fixing the roof tiles, painting the walls, making a wooden fence from used bamboo. He borrowed a simple suit from his driver and prepared the betrothal gifts from his side jobs in the village. This proposal would be a huge test. And without realizing it, Ayu was also mentally preparing herself. She had rejected Dimas outright. She chose Ranga, whatever the risk, but she didn't know her family had a cunning plan for the proposal day. A great humiliation that would mar her special day. The day that was supposed to be the start of happiness was shrouded in a gray cloud they hadn't yet realized. In the large white house with tall pillars in the front yard, a tense atmosphere enveloped Ayu's family living room. Pawibowo, Ayu's father, sat with crossed legs, staring sharply at his daughter. Beside him, Buningsi, Ayu's mother, stood with hands on her hips, her face full of disappointment. "So you truly choose that man, you? The man who lives in that almost collapsing house?" Buningsi's voice rose. Ayu looked down. Her voice trembled. "I stand by my choice, Boo. Ranga is a good man. He's hardworking, humble, and I'm happy when I'm with him." Pakwibowo sighed heavily. "You know very well we already consider Dimas like our own son. He has a clear future, owns a large property business in the city. What does this Ranga do? He just delivers vegetables and cleans the old house." Ayu remained silent. She knew she had no proof to show Ranga wasn't just any man. She only had conviction, and in her parents' eyes that wasn't enough. After nearly 2 hours of arguing, Pakwibowo finally spoke in a cold tone. "Fine, if you're sure, go ahead. But on one condition. We want the proposal to be done formally here at our house, so we know exactly who he is, who his family is, and what he can offer." Buningsi smirked. "And make sure he comes in his best clothes, okay? Don't let the neighbors think we're accepting a poor man as our son-in-law." Ayu looked at her mother bitterly but didn't respond. In her heart, she prayed Ranga wouldn't be offended. She knew her extended family wouldn't be welcoming. But Ayu believed Ranga was strong enough to endure any mistreatment that might occur. On the other side of the village, Ranga sat with Pa Haji, his driver and right-hand man for years. They talked on the porch of the house, which now looked more decent after being repainted and tidied up. The lights were replaced, the small garden was cleaned, and the bamboo fence stood neatly. "Mas Ranga, sure you want to proceed with this proposal under cover like this?" Pak Haji asked worriedly. Ranga nodded firmly. "If Ayu is truly sincere, she won't be ashamed of my appearance or this house. But if she changes, it means I haven't found true love yet." Pak Haji nodded slowly. "But Ayu's family, I hear people say they like to show off. They might humiliate you, Mas. Ranga smiled. Let them. I didn't come to be seen as great. I came to prove my intentions. 3 days before the proposal, Ranga went alone to Ayu's house to deliver the invitation politely. He wore a white cocoa shirt and faded cotton trousers, carrying a small box of fruit and cakes from the market. As he opened the gate to Ayu's house, he was immediately met by Bu Ningxi's scornful look as she watered the plants. Oh, what are you doing here? Bu Ningxi asked bluntly. I want to deliver the proposal invitation. Bah, the date is agreed with Ayu. I want to give it directly to her parents. Bu Ningxi looked him up and down. Delivering an invitation dressed like that? Is your house even ready to receive our extended family guests? Ranga bowed politely. I apologize, Bu. My house is indeed simple, but my intentions are serious. Bu Ningxi took the invitation with one hand, then turned away without saying thank you. Ranga took a deep breath. Meanwhile, Ayu, peeking from behind a window, sensed something was wrong, but she couldn't do much. Everything was prepared. Decorations, food, even invitations to neighbors were distributed. The proposal day drew closer, yet behind all the preparations, a cunning plan was being hatched by Ayu's family, not to welcome but to test and humiliate. And Ranga, though not fully aware, was prepared for all possibilities, including the worst. That day the sky was clear, but the atmosphere in Ayu's family's large house was overcast by ill intent, neatly hidden behind fake smiles. A grand white tent stood in the yard, plastic flowers decorated the tables, and lavish food was laid out since morning. Neighbors arrived wearing their best clothes, curious about the simple man daring to propose to Pat Wibowo's daughter. Inside her room, Ayu sat quietly in a simple pastel green kabaya dress. She looked uneasy, not because of her makeup, but because of a bad feeling that had haunted her since last night. She had warned her mother not to be rude. But Bu Ningxi only replied, let him know his place. If he's a real man, he'll endure the shame. At exactly 9 a.m., an old car entered the yard. Its paint was faded, the body dented, and the engine made a rough sound. Ranga got out, wearing a simple batik shirt, carrying a betrothal gift box wrapped in cheap cloth. Behind him, Pak Haji got out carrying 2 trays of fruit and market cakes. They looked very plain. Too plain compared to the other guests with their shiny shoes and expensive shirts. Whispers immediately arose from all directions. That's Ayu's fiancé? Oh my, coming in that car? I thought he was a businessman. Looks like a traveling repairman. Ranga smiled faintly. He had anticipated this, but his steps remained firm as he entered the yard towards the lavishly decorated living room. Pak Wibowo greeted him with an obviously forced smile. Bu Ningxi just sat on the sofa, eyeing Ranga sideways. After brief greetings and small talk, Ranga presented the betrothal gifts. Bu Ningxi opened them one by one, deliberately in front of all the guests. The boxes contained a prayer outfit, mukena, batik cloth, and a set of prayer tools bought from the traditional market. Everything was neat, but nothing was expensive. Bu Ningxi held up one batik cloth and said loudly, "This was bought at Pasar Kembang. I know this pattern. 200,000 for 2 pieces, cheap." The guests chuckled softly. Ranga remained silent, just bowing his head. Pak Wibowo added in a condescending tone, "Mas Ranga, I'm sorry, but I have to ask. With a house like that and finances that seem tight, are you sure you can support Ayu? We don't ask for luxury, but living in an almost collapsing house?" Laughter was heard again. Ranga stayed calm. "I understand, Pak. My house isn't big, but it's an inheritance and I'm slowly fixing it." Trying? Bu Ningxi cut in. "So he's not capable yet. Not ready. Come on, she's our only daughter. You want to take her to that shack? Hole riddled floor, leaking roof, outside toilet, comfortable living there." The atmosphere grew heated. Ayu, sitting inside her room, couldn't take it anymore. She stood up, walked quickly to the living room, and said firmly, "Enough. Bah, I'm the one who will live with Ranga, not you." But Bu Ningxi immediately stood up. "Oh, you think marriage is only about love? You're a woman. You need a decent place to live, a proper life. Are you willing to live in poverty for a man who isn't even ashamed to come proposing in a junk car?" Ayu looked at Ranga, hoping he would speak, but Ranga remained silent. He just closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them with an unusual look, full of hurt, but also determination. "If you want to judge me by my house and vehicle, then I truly don't deserve to stand here," Ranga said slowly. "But I came with good intentions, not to be measured by the price of clothes or the color of a car." Pak Wibowo gave a small laugh, patting his knee. Let me give you some advice, Mass. If you're not capable yet, don't force it. Ayu needs a future, not a heavy life drama. Ranga bowed his head, but only briefly. He looked deeply into Ayu's eyes, then spoke softly. I'm sorry, Ayu. I tried, but maybe I'm truly not worthy yet. And before anyone could say anything else, Ranga walked away. Pakhaji followed behind, taking back the betrothal gifts left on the table. Ayu wanted to chase after him, but Bu Ningxi held her arm. Let him go, don't stop him. Let him know his place. What they didn't know was that Ranga's steps that day would bring a huge shock the next day, a reality they wouldn't be able to laugh at. The old car carrying Ranga drove slowly away from the grand house. Heavy silence hung inside the cabin. Pahaji glanced sideways at Ranga, who sat quietly, fists clenched on his lap, eyes fixed straight on the dusty dirt road. No words came from his mouth, only breaths that sounded heavier than usual. Upon arriving home, Ranga got out slowly. He opened the door to his old house, closed it soundlessly, and sat on the bamboo bench in front of the window. His gaze was empty, but inside a storm was raging, not because of the insults, not because of the blow to his pride, but because of the look of fear in Ayu's eyes, unable to fight for their love. He had come with hope, brought courage, left behind his dignity as a boss for the love he yearned for. But all he got in return was laughter and taunts. His house was called a chicken coop. His gifts were deemed cheap. He was demeaned in front of the guests. Pahaji came with a glass of water. He placed it on the table and sat beside Ranga. Maz, I know it hurts, but this isn't the end. If you want, I'll get your luxury car. We'll go back there right now. Let everyone know who you really are. Ranga shook his head slowly. Not yet. I want to know one thing. Will Ayu still choose me or not? Pahaji bowed his head. I'm afraid she might not be as strong as you think. At Ayu's house, the atmosphere changed instantly after Ranga left. Ayu cried in her room, clutching the shawl she wore during the proposal. She felt choked by the reality that her parents had humiliated the man she loved most. Bu Ningxi, however, felt proud. She walked into the living room with a satisfied smile. Finally, that boy knew his place. We saved Ayu from a hard life. But Pak Wibowo looked a little uneasy. He hadn't expected Ranga to leave without a single protest. He thought Ranga would get angry, or at least defend himself. But Ranga's silent demeanor held something more frightening. Something he didn't know and didn't want to know. That evening, Ranga sat alone in his living room. He held his phone, staring at Ayu's name on the screen. He thought for a long time, then decided to type a message. Forgive me for coming today. I hope you are happy with your decision. He almost pressed send, but his fingers stopped. He deleted the message and put the phone down. He didn't want to be a man who begged. Suddenly, a knock on the door startled him. He stood up quickly and opened it. Ayu stood there. Her face was swollen, her eyes red. I want to talk, Ayu said softly. Ranga invited her in. Ayu sat on the same bamboo bench they used to sit on. She looked at Ranga and said, I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. I didn't know they would be that cruel. I understand, Ranga replied. You must be in a difficult position. But I told Mom and Dad, I don't want to be matched with Dimas. They were furious. But I stand by my choice. Ranga looked at Ayu in silence. And what is your plan now? Ayu took a deep breath. I don't know, but I won't go back to Dimas. If you still want to accept me, I will live here in this house with you. No matter how bad things were, Ranga didn't answer immediately. He stood up, took a small box from the drawer and opened it. Inside was a simple ring, yet clean and sparkling. I bought this with my earnings while I was here. It's not an expensive ring, but if you believe in me, then I'm ready to propose to you again. Not at their house, but in this house. Ayu smiled through her tears. She nodded slowly, but what they didn't know that night was that someone was secretly taking photos from outside the window, someone who would spread that information to the very person who should never have been underestimated. Tomorrow the world would change, and Ranga's face would appear on screens no one could shut off, not as a poor man, but as the owner of the world they had scorned raw. The next morning, the sun hadn't fully risen when the sound of the television in Mr. Wibowo's living room blared at a rather high volume. Mrs. Ningxi was brewing coffee while reading a group chat among her social club friends, discussing yesterday's failed proposal. It was full of laughter and mockery. Some even shared photos of Ranga's old car parked in front of the house. I knew that boy would be ashamed for life, murmured Mrs. Ningxi, sipping her coffee. But the sound from the TV suddenly froze her hand mid-air. A female reporter appeared on screen, standing in front of a soaring, majestic glass-clad high-rise. This morning, PT Rangga Mahardika Property officially opened its new branch in the prime business district of South Jakarta. This property company is known as one of the fastest growing in the past 5 years. And now we will speak directly with the young CEO behind this remarkable success. The screen switched. Rangga's face appeared, wearing a black suit, standing calmly amidst a crowd of journalists answering questions. Behind him, a row of luxury cars was neatly lined up. Mrs. Ningsi nearly dropped her cup. "What, Rangga?" she whispered, barely audible. Mr. Wibowo, who had just come out of the bathroom, stared at the screen with a pale face. Suddenly, Mrs. Ningsi's phone buzzed violently. Family and social groups were buzzing. Everyone was sharing the same video. One message even read, "Mrs. Ningsi, this is the ideal son-in-law you rejected yesterday." In an instant, their world turned upside down. Meanwhile, at the headquarters of PT Rangga Mahardika Property, a festive atmosphere filled with important guests, business partners and journalists prevailed. Rangga stood at the podium. His face was calm, but his heart churned, not from vengeance, but because the honesty he had guarded all this time was finally laid bare. After the welcome speech, a female reporter asked, "Mr. Rangga, the public is quite shocked by your very simple lifestyle lately. What was the reason behind it?" Rangga smiled. "I was on a personal journey, incognito. You could say I wanted to see the world through a different lens. I wanted to know who loved me for my heart, not for the figures in my bank account or the company's big name." The room fell silent. All eyes were on him. And that journey brought me the truth about who truly saw me, as a human being, and who only judged by appearances. Thunderous applause erupted, but in a corner of the crowd, Ayu stood frozen. She had come alone secretly, without telling anyone. She just wanted to see Rangga one last time in his true form. Rangga looked in her direction. Their eyes met, but he didn't wave, didn't greet her. He only nodded and turned away. Journalists swarmed him again, but one last sentence from Rangga stopped everything. "Thank you to everyone who ever underestimated me. You taught me to love myself first before expecting respect from others." Meanwhile, at Ayu's family home, the atmosphere had completely changed. Mr. Wibowo sat on a chair with a gloomy face. Mrs. Ningsi was silent, her eyes empty. All the arranged marriage plans with Dimas suddenly crumbled. Dimas, who knew Rangga was his business rival, immediately cut off all communication. And Ayu returned home that night and locked herself in her room. She only cried silently, not because Rangga had become a big boss, but because now she felt the distance between them was too vast to bridge. Tomorrow an invitation would arrive at their house. Not a proposal invitation, but an engagement invitation from Rangga that would change everything. The next morning, the sky was overcast, as if it knew a storm was coming not from the heavens, but from a single sheet of gold-framed paper, neatly placed on the Wibowo family's dining table. An exclusive invitation with an embossed luxury logo, delivered directly by an official uniformed courier. It bore the grand name, Rangga Mahardika Property. Mrs. Ningsi stared at the invitation with trembling hands. This is an engagement invitation?" Mr. Wibowo read the name printed below the company logo. Official invitation. Project launch and engagement. Ceremony of the director, Mr. Rangga Mahardika. Below it was listed the event location, Grand Nirwana Hotel. Main ballroom, formal black tie dress code. Then their eyes widened as they read the name of the prospective partner beautifully printed beneath it. Rangga Mahardika and Putri, Wulandari. The atmosphere in the dining room was quiet. Ayu stood in the doorway, her face pale. She couldn't say anything. No tears, only a silence that hit her chest repeatedly. She knew that name. Putri was Rangga's personal assistant, the woman she once thought was just a regular colleague. Ayu was stunned. Her heart collapsed. "Did he invite us on purpose to get revenge?" whispered Mrs. Ningsi. Mr. Wibowo shook his head. "Or perhaps he just wants to show us who he really is." The engagement day arrived. The Grand Nirwana Hotel ballroom was filled with prominent figures from various industries. Company executives, community leaders, even ministers attended. Journalists lined up neatly on one side, capturing images of the lavish gold and white dominated decor. On the main stage stood the prospective bride and groom, Rangga and Putri. Putri looked elegant in a modern ivory gown. Rangga wore a black suit that made him look 10 years younger. He smiled, but his eyes weren't entirely happy. Something still lingered in his mind. Something from the past he hadn't fully closed. As the event began, the MC read out Ranga's extraordinary achievements, founding a company at a young age, international expansion, countless awards. All the guests were mesmerized. Among the crowd, Ayu came quietly. She stood in a corner of the room wearing a dark blue dress, unaccompanied. Her gaze was fixed on the stage, and when Ranga descended from the stage to mingle with the guests, his eyes inadvertently caught Ayu's figure in the crowd. They stared at each other. Time seemed to stop. Ayu stepped forward a few paces, but before any words left her mouth, someone approached Ranga from behind. Mas Ranga, this is the representative from the Japanese investors who wants to meet you, said Putri, linking her arm with Ranga's. Ranga glanced back towards Ayu, but he only nodded once and left with Putri. Ayu stood frozen, her face not angry. She didn't cry, but there was a deep wound invisible to anyone. She knew the chance was gone, not because Ranga had changed, but because time and attitudes were now too late to mend. On the other side of the room, Mrs. Ningsi and Mr. Wibowo were also present. Their faces were downcast with shame. Not a single guest greeted them. Everyone was too busy admiring Ranga, who was no longer the same as the man in a faded t-shirt, who came bearing market-bought engagement gifts. But for Ranga, the most painful thing wasn't their rejection, but the fact that the love he once fought for with sincere intentions died not because of others, but because the person who should have believed in him didn't dare stand by his side when the world scorned him. And from afar, Ayu knew that night wasn't just Ranga's engagement. It was also the silent funeral of the hope they had once built together in that dilapidated house with bamboo stools and a simple cup of tea. A week had passed since Ranga and Putri's engagement event shook social media and the business world. Videos of them shaking hands with high-ranking officials went viral with bombastic captions. Scorned for a dilapidated house, now owns 72 property projects across Indonesia. But not many knew. Behind it all, Ranga still held onto a small wound in the corner of his heart. Not from vengeance, but from memories. Memories of a girl who used to greet him every morning in front of the small boutique, bringing warm tea and a simple smile. Memories of the sincerity he hoped could heal his soul. One night, as he sat on the balcony of his penthouse in Jakarta, an idea came to him. He gazed at the tall buildings standing in the distance, then picked up his phone and wrote a private message. Shortly after, a special invitation was sent to Mr. Wibowo's house. Not from the property company, not from Putri. The invitation was signed directly by Ranga Mahardika, not as director, but as the full owner of the Grand Nirwana Hotel. The content was very brief. Invitation to dinner and clarification, solely for Mr. Wibowo and Mrs. Ningsi's family. Location, Roof Restaurant, Grand Nirwana Hotel. Time, 7 p.m. Please attend without other companions. Mr. Wibowo trembled reading it. Mrs. Ningsi almost refused outright. But after realizing the social pressure hitting them since the failed proposal, she couldn't decline. They arrived with faces full of confusion and unsettled hearts. In the luxurious 35th floor restaurant, they were greeted by a personal waiter and escorted directly to the frontmost VIP table with a view of the glittering city. Shortly after, Ranga appeared. This time without a suit, he wore only a clean white shirt and simple black pants. But he couldn't hide his authority. "Thank you for coming," he said as he sat down. Mrs. Ningsi spoke immediately. Her tone completely changed. "Mas Ranga, we want to apologize about the proposal back then. We truly didn't know who you really were." Ranga looked at them with a calm gaze. "I didn't invite you to apologize, but for one thing only." Mr. Wibowo straightened up. "What is it, Maz?" "I just want to say that I'm now engaged and my life is fine. But most importantly, I want to thank you." Mrs. Ningsi frowned. "Thank us?" "Yes. Thank you for showing me that true love doesn't waver just because of insults or a dilapidated house. Unfortunately, what I encountered back then wasn't true love." Mr. Wibowo bowed his head. Mrs. Ningsi fell silent. There was no worthy answer. Ranga stood up and looked at them one last time. "I hope Ayu can be happy. I just want you to know, I came to your house sincerely, not bringing wealth, but bringing a sacred intention. But if sincere intentions must be humiliated, then you have lost more than you can imagine." Without waiting for an answer, Ranga left them there. No anger, no shouting. Only words so profound they would shake the chest of anyone who heard them. Meanwhile, Ayu was sitting by her bedroom window. She gazed at the night sky, hoping for a miracle to turn back time. But she knew that chance was gone, taken by the man she once loved but didn't fight for in time. And that night's invitation was the most graceful farewell she had ever witnessed. That night, the city's atmosphere was still glittering. But in Ayu's room, illuminated only by a desk lamp, solitude pressed every corner. She sat hunched on the floor amidst piles of memory photos. In her right hand was the small ring Ranga had given her, which she never had the chance to return. The ring wasn't expensive, but now its value was beyond measure. Ayu replayed the video of Ranga and Putri's engagement, now spread everywhere. Each of Ranga's smiles pierced her heart. Each step he took beside Putri felt like a stab. But what choked Ayu the most was Ranga's last gaze from the stage. When their eyes met before disappearing into the sea of guests, she couldn't blame anyone. Not Ranga, not fate. She knew she herself had failed to stand up for the man who loved her wholeheartedly. On the day Ranga was insulted and metaphorically spat upon, she was silent. She looked down. She let that man walk away without holding his hand. And now she regretted it too late. Ayu's tears burst forth, uncontrollably torrential. She covered her face with both hands. Her body shook. Amidst her sobs, a knock sounded at her door. "Ayu, it's Mom. Can I come in?" Ayu didn't answer. The door opened slowly. Mrs. Ningsi entered and saw her crying daughter. "I know you're disappointed, but you have to accept reality. Ranga is no longer ours." Ayu looked at her mother with red eyes. "Mom, why did you humiliate him so cruelly back then?" Mrs. Ningsi was silent. For the first time, she couldn't answer. In her heart, she was also haunted by unerasable guilt. All the neighbors' gossip, all the jabs in the social group chats, all the cynical glances she had once thrown were now whips lacerating her self-respect. The next day, Ayu recklessly went to the headquarters of Ranga Mahardika property. She stood in front of the skyscraper she had only seen on TV before. Security personnel stopped her. "Sorry, what is your business?" "I want to meet Mr. Ranga," Ayu answered softly. "Do you have an appointment?" "No." "Sorry, without a scheduled appointment, you cannot meet. He is very busy." Ayu bowed her head. She tried to explain, but it was futile. She could only stand under the harsh sun, looking up at the black glass windows reflecting the sky's image. Inside the building, Ranga was in a meeting. But a report about a female visitor named Ayu had reached him. He read the message from his personal assistant. "Ayu came wanting to meet. We rejected her due to no appointment." Ranga stared at the screen for a long time. A very long time. But then he put down his phone and continued his presentation. Outside, Ayu was still standing, clutching her bag tightly. Her hope was fading, but she refused to give up. She waited until the security personnel asked her to leave. And as she walked away from the magnificent building, her steps were heavy. Not from fatigue, but because reality was beginning to sink deep into her mind. True love doesn't always wait. And if you bow your head too long while someone fights for you, then one day all that remains is their back walking away towards a new destiny you cannot catch. Dusk was slowly falling when a sleek black car stopped in front of the old house that had once been almost derelict. Now the house had been renovated, but deliberately preserved in its original form. The wood remained aged, the windows still creaked when opened, and the bamboo hanging lamp on the front porch was still left, hanging as it always had. The difference was, now the house stood on land worth billions of rupiah, fully owned by a famous CEO. On the porch, Ranga sat wearing a white shirt rolled up to his elbows. Beside him, Putri arrived carrying 2 cups of hot tea. They spoke calmly, relaxed, like two friends who understood each other's heart's direction. "Still can't forget her?" Putri asked softly, without a hint of jealousy. Ranga sighed, looking at the sky turning orange. Not about not being able to forget, but more about a lesson that will never fade. Putri smiled. "I'm glad Maz didn't marry out of woundedness, but chose to be with me because you want to move forward, not look back." Ranga turned and gave a small smile. "You know, I used to think love had to be fought for until the end. But it turns out, if you keep fighting alone, all that remains is pain." Putri nodded. "And this house is a witness to all of that." Ranga stood up, looking at the dilapidated house from the small yard. Now he no longer saw it as a hiding place. That house was a symbol of his true self. The place he started everything, the place he fell. The place he discovered who was sincere and who was only interested in the mask. When night truly fell, The house lights were turned on. Neighbors who once only knew him as Mas Rangga living in the old house now visited without awkwardness. Some children played in the yard, calling Putri's name familiarly. There was no high fence, no tight security. Rangga didn't want any of that. He wanted to still be able to sit on the bamboo chair by the window, greet neighbors, feed the alley cats, and occasionally brew hot tea with his faithful wife. Because for him, true luxury isn't in expensive chandeliers or private elevators, but in the peace of a heart no longer burdened by the desire to be acknowledged. And this dilapidated house, which was once the reason he was scorned, had now become the most elegant symbol of victory he ever possessed. Not because he had retaliated with wealth, but because he had proven one thing. Self-worth needs no validation from those who don't know the content of your heart. Final note, as per original text. This story teaches us that self-worth and sincerity cannot be measured by wealth, grand houses, or luxury cars. True love is born from an honest heart, not from eyes dazzled by opulence. Sometimes, the person we scorn today is the one most deserving of our respect tomorrow. So never judge someone solely by their appearance. Behind their simplicity might lie unimaginable strength. This story is a fictional narrative crafted to feel realistic, so we can contemplate its meaning and draw life lessons from each part. The names, places, and events are entirely fictional. Thank you for following this story until the end. If you enjoyed the storyline, please leave a comment, click the like button, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss other interesting stories. See you in the next tale.